People often picture the divine as a harmless, comforting presence, but the ancient texts describe something entirely different, a terrifying, uncontainable force of pure justice that vaporizes imperfection on contact. When flawed human beings encounter this level of absolute perfection, the only logical response is overwhelming terror. It is the immediate, visceral realization that you are completely outmatched and hopelessly exposed. Thousands of years ago, a massive group of newly freed slaves faced this exact scenario at Mount Sinai. The creator of the universe initiated a meeting to bridge the gap between heaven and earth, offering to bind himself directly to the Israelites as their personal king. Proximity to absolute perfection always induces terror, but the way a person reacts to that terror, whether they surrender to it or sprint in the opposite direction, dictates whether they survive the encounter. At the base of Sinai, the Israelites saw the smoke and heard the thunder, and they panicked. Instead of submitting, they backed away. They demanded that Moses act as a buffer, begging him to speak to them so God wouldn't have to. This retreat functions as a protective shield for the ego. If God remains at a distance, his justice stays theoretical. But proximity forces a direct confrontation with our habits and inherited preferences, requiring us to be molded into something we aren't. We stand far off to ensure our current lifestyle remains undisturbed. By demanding distance, we maintain a sense of control. We get to keep our comforting habits and our carefully crafted self-image without the abrasive friction of someone else calling the shots. We employ the exact same tactic today. We naturally default to worldviews that make us feel validated and comfortable, keeping the scary or demanding aspects of the divine safely boxed away where they can't interfere. However, the instinct to protect our ego by keeping absolute truth at a safe distance is the exact mechanism trapping us in our own flaws. There is a different way to respond to divine terror. We see it in figures like the prophets Isaiah and Ezekiel, or the Apostle Peter, who experienced that same overwhelming proximity. They didn't negotiate or ask for a buffer. They collapsed physically. They offered zero excuses, pointing no fingers, openly confessing their complete ruin. In every single case, God's reaction is mechanical and exact. Instead of enacting destructive judgment, he immediately removes their guilt, commands them not to fear, and physically sets them on their feet with a new purpose. Abandoning all attempts to defend yourself or your ego is the necessary trigger. Passive submission leads directly to restoration. This diagram represents the strict demands of divine law. The threshold for success is absolute perfection. When we try to prove our own worth from a safe distance, our best efforts always stall out and fail. The historical Jesus doesn't arrive to lower the bar or abolish the standard. Instead, he acts as a proxy. He lives a flawless life and perfectly clears that unyielding threshold on our behalf. This enables a mechanism called imputation. When you surrender, Christ transfers his perfect clearance of the law onto you, replacing your failed attempt with his success. Your survival relies 0% on your ability to reach God on your own. It depends entirely on receiving the perfect status earned by your proxy. What does a life look like once the desperate need to protect yourself and maintain distance is stripped away? Modern rebellion is often a quiet redefinition of our responsibilities. We look at the specific, selfless labor we've been handed and find ways to sidestep the suffering it requires, prioritizing our own comfort over the people we are meant to serve. God's design for our lives involves tedious, selfless labor for the benefit of our neighbors. Our instinctual desire is to curate paths that feel safer, familiar, and protect our social standing. Clinging to a preferred, comfortable identity rather than accepting the call to serve others is the modern equivalent of standing far off at the base of the mountain. We have to actively practice dying to ourselves. We do this by allowing our personal image and ego to diminish in our daily responsibilities. The exhaustion and mundanity of serving others is exactly where we co-rule with Christ. Do not run from the terrifying presence of the Lord. Let his justice kill your ego, because it is the only way he can resurrect you in glory.